Smithville is a historic community located to the east of I-77 in the town of Cornelius. To understand its beginnings, we must go back in time to the Potts Plantation, a large estate on the east side of Cornelius, which is designated on the National Register of Historic Places. The property dates back to a land grant in the year 1752 by King George II. When a white man named John Potts took over the property in 1753, he began a family homestead that has continued as a working farm to this day for 8 generations. During the passing of time and through these 8 generations, the plantation operated in farming activities, which included the services of slaves forced to work and live on the property. When the Civil War ended and slaves were emancipated in 1863, many newly freed slaves left for opportunities in the North, but a number became sharecroppers or tenant farmers locally. Part of the Potts Plantation land included property on the western side of town. In 1908, a described kind-hearted Potts descendant named Jacob Lafayette Smith began to mortgage and land parcels to the bank so that black sharecroppers and tenants farmers who were children or grandchildren of former slaves could pay on those mortgages at low rates or virtually little money to own them. He knew that without an established community, many blacks would be forced to relocate and their families would be separated, plus there would be a loss in the labor force. Apparently, many white Cornelius residents did not condone Smith's actions. However, those who benefited from his willingness to sell his family's land to them were deeply appreciative. Thus began the roots and story of Smithville, a name given to the community in honor of Jacob L. Smith. Torrance Chapel, a Amizon Church. At some point prior to 1869, a Reverend Ephraim Torrance built a brush arbor near the place now known as Smithville, most likely the township of Limley. The community had been settled by newly released slaves following the end of the Civil War. Church was a vital part of the spiritual and social fabric of this community. In 1869, the first frame structure of the church was built on the property given to the church leaders by white friends named the Glasspies. The original lay members mentioned in all recorded church history are Miles Worth and Harriet Torrance. This church became Torrance Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church back in time before roadways existed in Cornelius and well before the completion of I-77, which bisected the town of Cornelius. In order to get to the Torrance Chapel Church, parishioners would make the 1 1/2 mile walk from Smithville on foot, ride horses, or travel in horse-drawn buggies along the unpaved roads. Church members who were children at the time recall arriving at church quite dusty, but happy to be there.
I remember us walking to church. There was a dusty graded road and rocks every Sunday.
And enjoying
it. A road full of kids going to church for Sunday school. You know, and cars be backed all the way up to Knox Road. Coming to Torrance Chapel Camp meeting. You know, and we walk it. We walk it every dust. We'd be dusty, but we went on.
I like Vacation Bible School. I'll always remember Vacation Bible School, and especially when we go out on picnics, and we could go to Catawba River walking. That's how close it was at that time. That's long, obviously, before Lake Norman. But we could go to Catawba River, and usually it was Aunt Bert that had us go over there, and we'd have a picnic, and I tell you, that was a delight for me.
I do have fond memories of going with Mother. She and a little lady named Miss Carter used to clean the church on Saturdays, and I would love to go with them to do that. I would go with them to clean the church, and for the first Sunday, Mother would make the leavened bread and have the juice ready and everything, and I would eat up that bread when she made it. It wasn't that, it was flat and nothing in it to rise, it wouldn't rise, but oh, that was the best. It was like crackers.
Union Bethel AME Zion Church, 20736 Catawba Avenue. Due to the difficulty involved for people to travel by foot or wagon to cover the 1.5 mile distance from Smithville to Torrance Chapel under various weather conditions, some Torrance Chapel parishioners decided that it would be a good idea to create a church located closer to where they live. Thus, the Union Bethel AME Zion Church was founded in Smithville in 1917 by the Stinson, Greer, Nelson, and Withers families. The church building, located at the corner of South Ferry and Catawba Avenue, had 2 front entrances at one time, as seen in all the historic photos. These entrances were later converted to bathrooms, and a central door was constructed instead. Smithville Park and former cotton fields. Long before the current sports fields and the splash pad playground existed, these fields were used for growing cotton. Several long-term Smithville residents remember picking cotton from those fields. There was a lot of cotton grown in and around Cornelius. As a matter of fact, Wilson Potts, my father, was quoted as saying there was so much cotton in Cornelius that it would blow around and look like it was snowing in July. Picking cotton by hand was not pleasant. The wall casings were hard and very sharp. Avoiding getting cut when pulling out the soft cotton was difficult. All of Cornelius was rural and agricultural at the time. Many continued to work in farming and made their living in this endeavor. To the west of the cotton field, there was a section of the field where baseball games were played by the hometown team known as the Cornelius Tigers. Nowadays, Smithville Park is the location of the annual jazz festival and other fun events hosted by the Smithfield Community Coalition and the town of Cornelius.
But that was a cotton field, and I recall picking cotton there. Didn't like it, but I recall because you only got paid pennies for doing it.
Over there where across the street there where the park is now, that used to be the cotton field. They used to raise cotton over there, and I don't remember ever picking cotton in there, but I remember Mother used to go and chop cotton, they called it. They chop around. When the cotton gets so high, she would go over there to chop around the cotton to keep the weeds from growing up in it. And I remember I'd go over there sometime with her just to be over there with her while she was doing that. But I never did that. But Mother Carrie did pick cotton. And she was the one that took us with her. We would go with her. Back then, the black schools would close at 12 o'clock during the cotton time to pick the cotton. We would get out of school a half a day so we could go to pick cotton, help those people that were growing the cotton, the white people that was growing the cotton. We didn't have the fields, but we would have to go. We didn't have to go, but we would go because you could make a little bit of money, you know. And mother used to go and mother could pick cotton, and all of us got that experience, all of my sisters and brothers and my brother, because she would take us with her. There was a girl that used to come pick the Robinsons. I don't know if you all remember her, Ailey Robinson, Miss Addie Forney's granddaughter. Oh boy, she could pick cotton. That girl could pick. She'd have 100 pounds.
The Nelson Homestead, 19721 South Ferry Street. And now for a look at what may be the oldest standing home remaining in Smithville. This home belonged to Richard and Carrie Nelson, who were some of the original founders of Union Bethel Amizon Church. Tax records show that this property was built in 1900. Most likelihood it existed for some time before that. Richard died at an early age, leaving Carrie to raise 10 children on her own. She earned her living by housekeeping, which included raising children for the white families in Cornelius, where she could walk to work on a daily basis. Typical of her generation, she sacrificed and sent many of her children to college, if they chose. At one time, the community of Smithville boasted a population of about 400 residents. There were many children who lived in this tight-knit community and have fond memories of growing up in Smithville.
I just want to add one thing about mother hollering across before the telephones. Well, when we got telephones, she hollered over the nana. And she didn't use her telephone. We would go running because we heard her holler. Go see what mother wants. So she still never used that telephone.
And of course, you guys know I grew up next door to Mother Carrie. And I remember her coming out on that back porch and calling women, lords. She'd go through the whole roster of names.
Smithville Lane. To discover more about the development of Smithville, an understanding of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which was a landmark decision signed into the law by U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson as part of a response to the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination and riots. The law prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, gender, and more. The section Title 8 of the Act is also known as the Fair Housing Act of 1968 and was accompanied by federal enforcement of such laws. Prior to its enactment, housing discrimination was a feature of local, state, and federal policy. Lenders, with the encouragement of the federal government, employed underwriting rules that sought to maintain racially white neighborhoods, a now discredited practice called redlining. By some analysis, 98% of the loans approved by the federal government between 1938 and 1968 went to white applicants. Fast forward to the 1970s and Smithville, development of this former grazing pasture and farmland located along what is now Smithville Lane is believed to have started with land that belonged to heirs of Jacob Smith and was later purchased by Mose Cook, a wealthy local farmer. Mose Cook partnered with the Kelly family to build homes in Smithville Lane around 1970. There were grants on housing available which helped Smithville residents acquire their homes. Some notable residents of this area were Nanny Potts, the wife of Mickey Potts. She taught at Torrance Lytle High School in Huntersville. She, along with her neighbor and former teacher Verdi Torrance, were active in creating summer reading programs for disadvantaged children. Nanny was elected to the Cornelius Town Board in 1983. Because she was the top vote getter, she became Mayor Pro Tem. When Mayor Russ Root resigned, Nanny Potts became mayor of Cornelius. Not only was she the first female mayor of Cornelius, she was also and still remains the only African American mayor to date. In 2020, the town of Cornelius honored her legacy by naming a newly paved and vital cut-through street near where she lived and named it Nanny Potts Lane.
She was always, keen on learning. And I'd hear about the things that she was promoting during the summer to help the children continue to learn and not forget everything once they were out of school for the summer. But I have known her, I guess, most of our lives.
Well, you want to talk about that lady? Oh man, we were married for 59 years, and it was a happy 59 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned early, when she started with the recreation and all the stuff, let her go. Don't be mad because she's not at home. Because she would get on a soapbox in a hurry, and she saw when something wrong, she would go try to correct it. That was just her. And she organized and she. Sometimes we had to remind her. Me and the kids, we weren't her students.
She be dictating to you.
She treated her like a student, and we had to remind her that we weren't her students.
It was nice of you and your boys to lend her to us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what you did.
That's what we did.
That's what you did.
Yeah. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's exactly what you did. She was everybody's mom.
The Rosenwald School. The Smithfield Rosenwald School started around 1923. A popular teacher who lived in the community also was Mrs. Durr McCullough, who taught there. The origins of this school involved Booker T. Washington, who had approached Julius Rosenwald, a philanthropist and president of Sears Roebuck at the time, about teaming up to build state-of-the-art schools for African American children across the South. The effort has been called the most important initiative to advance Black education in the early 20th century. There were 5,000 Rosenwald schools built between 1917 and 1932. Only about 10% of those schools survive today. During the segregation era, Black children attended these Rosenwald schools, which were 2 or 3 room schoolhouses.
It never was over 6 teachers over there, I don't think. And the principal was also a teacher. It was a teaching principal. And sometimes you might have been in a combination grade, like grades 1 and 2, 2 and 3. And sometimes it just depended on the number of children that were in those grades. But we had good times, and we had teachers that came into the community and made themselves, they didn't live here, but they made themselves welcome and got to know the parents. And when Thanksgiving would come around, we'd have a dinner, you know, to celebrate Thanksgiving and some holidays. And
when the Smithville Rosenwald School closed in 1953, Smithfield children in grades 1 through 8 were transferred to the Davison Colored School, later to become Ada Jenkins, which was named after a former Davison Elementary School teacher.
I do have very fond memories of going there. I was able to walk from home to school, and we didn't have a cafeteria, but we did for lunch. They would bring milk there. They would bring our lunch in. We would carry lunch too. And my grandfather had a store up on the corner. And somehow we were able to get, somebody I guess would go and get it. I don't remember just how it went, but we were able to get cookies. And that's where I learned to eat ginger snaps.
After 8th grade, they attended the Torrance Lytle School in Huntersville. Integration in Mecklenburg began in 1966.
1965 is when President Johnson signed the school desegregation order. So 1966 was my first year in North Mecklenburg, which is my 11th and 4th grade years. And I have to admit, those are probably the worst 2 years of my life. You know, it was like, that was the first time that I mean, even though we grew up in a segregated world back then, we lived in a community, a Black community, where we didn't really feel a lot of that stuff just from growing up at home. But I really felt it going to North Mecklenburg. That was my first year to really feel segregation. And I hated those 2 years. You know, the school flag was the stars and bars. The school fight song was Dixie. And we had to endure all that stuff. And I remember first class I went to was an American history class. And I was the first Black in the class. And I walked in and everybody moved their desk over to the other side of the room. And I dealt with that type stuff for 2 years in high school. I really hated it.
After the Rosenwald School closed in 1953, ownership of the Rosenwald School reverted to the county, which then leased it to the Bethel Community Center Club. The group included Ernest Harvell, Ozone Bryce, Mac Bryce, and James Caldwell, just to name a few. The Bethel Community Center used the center as a hub of activity and provided a place where people could get hot dogs and hamburgers. There were also parties, dances, and events. The men in the Bethel Community Center were active in keeping the former Rosenwald School a vibrant place for the Smithville residents.
Yes, I remember the Smithfield Community Men. My dad was one of the members of that group.
They were really an incredible group of men. And they are responsible for having started that community center, which, now exists. But at that time, those men were so devoted to the community, and they had pride in the community. Every one of those men had pride in the community. And they developed that center so that the young people would have a place where they could go and, dance and get sandwiches and things like that. And I tell you, they were pillars of the community. And they were responsible for many, many things. But the men of the community center, they were special men, each and every one.
Our only social outlet here at that time for teenagers, when you got to be a teenager, that was the only place we had to go. And your parents felt safe to allow you to go.
Well, it was, when I grew up, it was about the only place we could go to. There still wasn't anything around.
But I really remember Mr. Ozarn. You know, we used to go over there on Saturday evening and Saturday nights, and I loved his food. He was a good cook. And I used to love his chicken sandwiches, and it was just fun. It was a lot of fun over there.
Yes. And they purchased it, and they kept it open for community activities. They had summer Bible study school over there with Union Bethel, Parents Chapel, and Hunter's Chapel. All of the children and the teachers got together, and I'm trying to think what else they did. They had summer programs for the kids over there. Nanny Potts had the summer programs over there for the community children. She headed that up with Park and Recreation, she and Verdi. And there were all sorts of activities. There were baseball games, softball games, and Sammy, you're right. Mr. Ozarn could really make a hot dog, and everybody went up there to get the hot dogs on the weekends. And it was a place where our parents would let us hang out, and we had curfews, and there were no street lights, but we could hang out till 11 o'clock as long as they knew you were up there at the center, because houses were around it, people were on the porches, and adults were looking at you, because if you did something and you were out there and you got the slightest bit of trouble, your mom and dad knew when you got home.
Additionally, they were involved in community efforts such as providing and purchasing streetlights. It can be said that this dynamic group of men and women worked tirelessly for decades to ensure that the land was acquired, promoting children literacy, procuring jobs, and when Smithville was turned down by the town of Cornelius for incorporation during the 1950s, they dug trenches for water pipes throughout the community. Later, they worked with Mecklenburg County to obtain public sewers.
But I certainly have vivid memories about the men digging the trenches, and this was all volunteer.
Wow.
Right.
Did not get paid a cent. And they all volunteered to dig these trenches so that running water could be brought to Smithville, because as Mickey said, they had planned to stop it up there where that ice cream parlor. And I remember too, Mickey, before electricity, because we used kerosene lamps.
And a lot of people in Cornelius had to get septic tanks often because they would flood and build up a cesspool.
I remember those cold winter days. Just imagine having to go to the outside toilet on those cold winter days.
Yes,
It was very
that's a blessing. Yeah, I can't remember when we didn't have no electricity, but I'm like Sammy, we had them out of houses, and then we didn't have no trash pickup. And I'm not telling you no lie, we had garbage piled up in the backyard so high like a mountain until, did the center man buy us a garbage truck, or?
Yeah.
The center man got us a garbage truck, and then they kept on hauling, but you would not believe the garbage. You can look up like a mountain, that's how, I'm not lying. Until they got it, the truck, and then we started easing it down, but it was terrible.
Oldest brick home, 20705 Vivian Lane. This house is owned by the Harville family and has aged to a point where repairs are very difficult. Life was different for Smithville residents during various eras. Today, this house is vacant. One of the reasons for vacancy around this historic homes in Smithville is because children and grandchildren who were heirs to the property have moved out of the community. Additionally, there are multiple heirs whose relatives did not leave a will for the future of the property. This phenomenon is an example of the need for revitalization efforts in Smithville.
It's just an ever turning situation where it's just so hard to get control over it. unless the government and the town take the initiative to repair what's wrong.
Again, I agree that we need something. We got a lot of vacant land here. We got a lot of, and if you look around us, you got all these very expensive houses being built in the area. The land is getting swallowed up in the area. When you look at Smithfield, we got all this vacant land, and at some point in time, something is going to happen. You know, whether we do something now or whether it be taken over, it's going to happen. So
Note how close the houses are to the road. These streets were part of the original loop of Smithville and remained narrow dirt roads as late as the 1950s. Once the streets were paved, it resulted in the homes being very near to the street. Additionally, families tended to build more than one home on a single property for the benefit of their children. Generally, those homes were built in the garden plot area of the property. A $300,000 federal community grant helped Smithville residents with housing renovations and also provided more water and sewer lines. One of the stores frequented by Smithville residents was on South Hill Street. It was black owned by Mr. Gabriel Johnson. The building has been torn down and is a vacant lot now. It was also the spot to play checkers with bottle top lids and to share neighborhood news.
Mother had a garden down in the back, and we would go down there, and she had chickens. Mother would go out there and she'd wring the chicken's neck and kill that chicken and pick it and get it ready for Sunday morning dinner.
Corner Catawba Avenue and South Hill Street. Smithville remained separate from Cornelius for many years and was relatively self-sustaining. Residents provided for themselves by working at businesses in town or at the hosiery mill on Main Street, north of Brick Road. At Davidson College as janitors, groundskeepers, laundry, or domestic work, such as nannies, ironing, cleaning, and cooking for white townfolk. They were day laborers and worked in sawmills. Most of the subdivided lots in Smithville were purposely long and deep, as seen in the original plot map of 1908, so that families could have large gardens to grow food. Also, there was a second store on the corner of South Hill Street and Catawba Avenue, and it was black owned by Clement Caldwell and his son Roy. It was another favorite hangout for some grocery items. And of course, there was a checkerboard in the recessed window, and of course, bottle lids for checkers. The building was torn down, making room for traffic on Highway 21 and I-77. At the east corner of Catawba Avenue and South Hill lived the Withers family. Isaac Ace Withers was an accomplished and very talented carpenter who worked at both textile mills in town. Withers had built a grand two-story home at the corner of Catawba Avenue and South Hill Street. It was a standout at the time, where he was able to show off his carpentry skills and social status by building a two-story house with a wraparound porch and classical columns. When the demolition of the house started in 1997, across the street from Isaac Ace Withers' house was a pasture which belonged to Gospey and Isla Burton. One of the Stinson family members used it for his cows to graze. Also, there were blackberry bushes and evergreen trees, which were cut by the residents for Christmas trees. In the late 1950s, the Burton family decided to plot the land, and it was subdivided into at least 15 lots. The road to these lots became Burton Lane. Mickey and Nanny Potts built their first home on the corner of Burton Lane and Catawba Avenue. Another longtime resident on this street are the Rosses. They operated a business on that street for many years. Thurman Ross, a longtime town commissioner, lives on this street.
When I was growing up in Smithville, Burton Lane didn't exist. Smithville Lane didn't exist. Houses were not on the other side of Catawba.
Hattie Torrance was a neighbor of Isaac A. Withers. Her home has been torn down and the lot on Catawba Avenue is empty. She was a midwife who delivered most of the babies, both black and white. The African American babies were delivered at home due to the fact that the closest black hospital was located in Charlotte, a good 25 miles or more away, and that hospital was called Good Samaritan. In the 1940s, the hospital in Mooresville started accepting black families. The Cornelius Community Garden, still on Catawba Avenue, was established on Smithville property in 2013. An article from the Lake Norman Media Group told of the garden's origins. For Lisa Mayhew Jones, a longtime Smithville resident and co-chair of the Smithfield Coalition, building the garden was more than a community project. It was a chance to relive childhood memories and honor her family. After Mayhew Jones' grandmother, Josephine Nelson Caldwell, passed away a couple of years ago, the family decided to sell the property. The buyer of the property was the town of Cornelius, who eventually leased the land to the Smithfield Coalition to build a community garden. Lisa says nothing better could have come out of the property, and my grandparents would be proud because they always had a garden here, and they'd be proud to know that we're using the property to make Smithville a community garden. Catawba Avenue in North Ferry. There was a third convenience store in Smithville. It was white-owned by John Harville and later became Libby's Grocery, and it was across the street from Union Bethel Church, facing Catawba Avenue. L.W. Nelson worked there, and he used to ride his bike to deliver groceries, or when he was given the keys to the company truck, would pick up folk on their way to or from the local cotton fields. This store would offer credit for residents to purchase goods in advance and pay later, a true community feature. Also on this corner to the east, there was a popular barber beauty shop that was owned by the Rivens family. Tanya Rivens is a well-known media personality. The shop was located at the corner of Catawba and North Ferry Street. Also on North Ferry Street is the Union Bethel Amizon Cemetery at the very end of North Ferry Street. Currently, as of 2021, there are many empty lots that exist in the Smithfield community. There are a number of reasons for this. To understand why, let's go back in time to how Smithville homes were built. Residents who wanted their home were typically forced to follow a build-as-you-go plan. This was because during that era, banks denied loans to Black people. It took time to save up funds so that the owner could save for materials. After having built the home in stages and by hand throughout time, and once the original owners of the home passed on, the property was left to multiple heirs, many of whom who no longer live in Smithville, and often without plans about what to do with the property. This has resulted in vacant homes, little maintenance, and disrepair. A good number of the homes succumbed to the elements, and still others are torn down by the county. There are homes that have withstood the test of times but currently sit vacant.
What do you remember about the community of Smithfield during that time? What do you
Lisa, it didn't look a lot different than it does now. There were more houses there because many have been torn down now. There were more folks living there actually back in the day. It was a larger population. There was a little store out there, a barbershop. I remember Ozzie Rivens, and think of him fondly. All the years he spent down at Cornelius School. I can remember when Union Bethel Church had a different look to it, and years later they added the new front and the steeple on top. So I just remember that fondly. It was the entranceway into Cornelius, and when Smithville ended, so did Cornelius back in the day. It's changed a lot over time, certainly west of Smithville, but Smithville hasn't changed to the extent that I think we would all like to see it improve, I think, for today's times. We were at that time a huge high school. North Mecklenburg became probably the biggest high school in the state, or close to it, with the influx of the students from Torrance Lytle. And it was a different world. It was difficult. It was difficult on them. It was different for us. It wasn't as difficult on the folks that had been there, but it was a whole new population there at North Mecklenburg High School.
Smithville is facing threats to its existence and is in need of revitalization and repurposing that will allow elderly residents to age in place and preserve the gems still present in the community. There is a development plan for the Smithville that ties preserving the past while embracing the future of Cornelius as a whole. Born from a partnership between the Smithfield Community Coalition, Willie Jones, and a design firm named Neighboring Concepts, an exciting new plan is leading the way for the future of Smithfield. Smithville is facing four major threats to its existence. 1, a rapidly aging population where most descendants do not live in Smithville or Cornelius. 2, relatively low land values due to isolation and blight, which will fuel outside investor purchases. 3, a very marketable location given the traffic problems in the area. And 4, introduction of the bus rapid transit BRT stop at exit 28 and Catawba will fuel home land purchases within walking distance to the proposed bus stop. A plan to revitalize Smithville has been proposed. The program attempts to address 4 key objectives. 1, eliminate displacement of current primarily low-income residents of Smithville. 2, eliminate blight and create value for the remaining homeowners in Smithville. 3. Connect Smithville to the town of Cornelius. And 4. Reposition Smithville as an emerging, mixed-income, mixed-tenure, multi-ethnic neighborhood of the future, primarily occupied by households making less than 80% of the area median income.
The plan is about really 3 things. Justice for the history of discrimination and disparate treatment to the residents of Smithville. It's about protecting the continued presence to make sure they can stay there. And the third thing is figuring out how to integrate new people into the old Smithville. So those are kind of 3 larger goals. I think at a more granular level, what we're doing is redeveloping vacant land and places that have abandoned buildings. We are not taking over Smithville. We are not forcing people to do anything, but we are focusing on the places where people are not and are fundamentally blighted. And we believe that if we don't do something about these, ultimately the market will buy these up and we'll end up with homes that will displace or change the quality of life of the existing residents.
If this plan doesn't go through and help Smithfield, what do you think will happen to Smithfield?
Well, this plan will go through and help Smithfield, or it won't get very far. Once our commissioners support it, one of the things it will do, it will lead us into a townwide plan, which Smithville will be part of it, which will give us access to all sorts of funding that we don't currently have.
How long does, if no funding, if nothing happened, how long would you think Smithfield would survive? Honestly.
2024, I suspect, will be the tipping point.
Okay.
At that point, it will be, you won't be able to undo it.
Doing your plan, does that cause any type of gentrification?
This program is an anti-gentrification program. And the way we do it is, and that's why it's important that we buy up all the houses, buy up all the vacant land and abandoned buildings, because then we set the values. The market doesn't set the values. And so we can say, in our case, this is what the land costs, because we've written it down. And one of the things we're doing is we're normalizing houses. So you can't come here for affordability and build a cheap house. We will put in all of the infrastructure. And so they will sell the house at, they'll make their markup and they'll make their profit, but there's no developer profit on top of it. We can put in the streets, we can put in the infrastructure, but more importantly, we can put deed restrictions on everything. Okay, so in order to live here, you're gonna live in a house that's walking distance to everything. But the flip side is your values are going to be constrained by deed restrictions. Even though the house values will be probably $350, we'll be giving them to you for $275, but you've got to agree to be a part of this thing. And this thing is Smithville. You have to be comfortable and happy to live in a historically African-American neighborhood. We're going to do art. We're going to do some things that will clearly define and uphold the history and applaud the history. in terms of giving character, we have a combination of townhomes and single families. Sometimes it seems easier to believe nothing's going to happen until the bulldozers are at your door.
What do you hope for the future of Smithville?
We know there's going to have to be some changes, but we would like to have some of it, stay the same, to keep the identity of Smithfield. That's what we've been hard working.
And I certainly would like to see Smithfield keep some of its identity, because as far as I'm concerned, there's a rich heritage there, and it should not be completely lost. And and I love the plans for the revitalization, and I hope those plans don't die because of the law. But I think Smithville, at least I still look at it as a wonderful place to live and raise a family. I think the history of Smithville, from its beginning straight through now, is important enough so that some of that identity needs to be preserved.
Because I am what I am because of Smithville.
If I would say I hope for anything for Smithfield, I would hope that it would be brought up to the 21st century as far as being a vibrant, walkable community, have a revitalization of the center, and let it be, I know it could be a historic, considered a historic part of a landmark in the community because of its Rosenwald status. But I would like to see it added on to, and have develop that land with a swimming pool, an indoor swimming pool for seniors, have a medical center there for seniors and anybody within the community or Cornelius. Have it be an area to promote outdoor lifestyles as well as indoor lifestyles, adapt to the environment, and make sure we have changes that are representative of our surrounding cities and even the town of Cornelius. It's grown so much, and there are banks there where people can walk to, a walking community, and have opportunities to have our children see a sense of heritage in which we had before, and let it continue and be ongoing and something that would drive pride.
I want them to keep this community. I'd like for them to redevelop the center, because that's a huge building that I know Miss Potts and all them, they used to have the summer camp for the kids to come and, give them something to do in the summertime. And she always wanted to do for the kids. So I'd like for them to just don't let the center just sit there. It's been sitting there for years, and it needs repairs, and I'd like for them to redevelop the center and use it. Even the churches could use it. It'd be a place you can have things, the groups at the church could use it for different things. But I would like for them to redevelop Smithville and let this always be I can see them building new homes and more people coming in, and we can tell them our old memories about Smithville, you know, get them interested. But I just want them to keep this, because it's a lot of history here in Smithville, and they so I would like for them to keep this little town, see it, you know, stand the homes that are there, maybe the homes that the people are still there, you know, maybe get help getting their homes revitalized or redone, and I think the Nanny Potts Road, I was very disappointed when it wasn't opened up to Smithfield. Mm-hmm. And that's something I hope to see, that is open up. And, you know, and the land down there is land down there that they can do, you know, you can't afford a home in Smithfield, Cornelius now. And if they could do something, you know, maybe build this land down there that they could build affordable homes, you know, apartments or something for the people, you know, that needs them, you know, and some of our kids might come back, you know, some of them still live in apartments, or maybe some homes that, some of the homes on some of the land where there is no home. I'd love to see that. But I don't know if I'll be able to, but maybe.
I want to see children playing in the streets. When I see children playing in the streets again, I know that parents around, you know, I know that Smithfield is on the way back at that. Because people are moving, young people are moving back. They're bringing their kids. And at that point, I know Smithfield is on the way back. So if I could see children in the streets playing like we used to do, I'd be a happy person.